be here. Thanks for inviting me. Hopefully this can help any of you that are starting to figure out how to go about this. We've done it not. Okay. Anybody in the back that can't ever hear me just sort of do this? No, I'll try to get louder. We've done some really bad things implementing this, so I'm going to try to talk through that. And I think there's some things we've done pretty well as well, so we'll talk through it. But just a little bit about LPL, just some of the numbers. But the bigger thing to know about us, it's a little bit unique, is that we have independent financial advisors that we support. We sort of, the best way to think of us is we build a platform for them to use to manage their book of business, to trade, all those sorts of things, right? They operate in their own independent model, but regulators like us to make sure they're secure, right? So it's sort of a really interesting thing that we deal with. We're the largest broker dealer in the country, so Fair likes to knock on our door quite a bit. And Fair has helped us talk to them as they come in to sort of have structure around those conversations. So here's some of the challenges that we walked into. Like, I was started at LPL just about 4 years ago. There was really no technology risk management team at all. So the first one to sort of preach that. So what we found out right off the bat, everybody thought about this completely differently. The language was different from enterprise risk management, operations risk, what little bit of tech risk we had, internal audit, regulators, everybody spoke a different language. So this is one of the biggest things we had to work through. This is where I think Fair is the biggest value. I'll come back to that. Because we had different language, we had different risk scales for how we measure things. And so when I would go, hey, we have this, I'll just use the high, medium, low thing. We have this medium risk, and the ERM turns around and goes, wait, that thing's a high, and internal audit says, well, I think that's a critical, it's not even on the scale, right? So it's all over the place. And so how do you have that conversation when different groups think about risk differently? You may be saying the exact same thing, but just because the scales are different, you're disagreeing. Then the last one that we're still struggling with today is a consistent risk tolerance. And it's something I'm hoping that when I'm here next year, I can have a conversation about. We've got some ideas around how to tackle that. But this is one that is really important, but don't stress if you're new to this. Don't stress if you don't have that for a little bit. Right? We've been able to do it on a kind of case-by-case, one-off basis. But what we're trying to deal with now is how we do it in aggregate. How do we have a conversation? How much risk do we have as a firm? And is this risk going to be the straw that broke the camel's back? Right? So that's sort of what we're trying to get to. Here's what we've done pretty well. Right? So we've defined how we're going to take this on, right? The methodology behind it. We've defined as a company that we're going to use most likely scenario to just talk about what's happening, right? Because one of the biggest problems we had was if I would say, hey, here's this issue, we found a pen test or whatever. And then I'd say, well, here's the compensating controls we have around that. We think the risk is whatever. Then all you're going to hear is this what about is, well, what about this scenario? What about this? What about this? What about this? So if you can get everybody talking about the same scenario, then it's a much better conversation of, do we have the right controls or not? What really can happen? What's that potential impact? What's the likelihood of it? Those sorts of things. And the other thing I think you guys probably all experience, right, is you have to take this and merge it into your enterprise methodology. So our ERM has a matrix-based risk, likelihood, impact scales. What we do is take what we get out of Fair and plug it into that. And so they aren't, one of the biggest mistakes we made was we tried to start showing those numbers to ERM, and they're like, what in the world is this? So you have tons of questions. They start questioning whether you know what you're talking about because they don't understand it. And for fairness, right, we didn't understand it the first time we saw it, right? It takes time to get through it. And so when we started plugging it in that way, and then if they have a question about, is this really a moderate impact or whatever the scale is, and you say, yeah, here's the data behind it that we feel like puts it in that bucket. So that was something we did pretty easy. And then ways we're doing it every day, every internal audit finding that comes across, we run it through, we use risk lens, we run it through there, see if it jives with what they're seeing. We use our risk register for anything self-reported. We'll run it through the methodology, see what it comes out with. And then the one that I think provides the most value is my team controls our technology risk portfolio, which is how we remediate issues in technology. FAIR is how we prioritize that investment. And so when we run this through, we'll get every team to give us a business case. Here's the risk we want to address, here's how we're going to do it. And then we can run that through and say, how much are we reducing the residual risk by that investment? And then that's how we prioritize our portfolio. And we've been doing that for about a year. This 2019 project was the first time we did that, and it's been a huge success. And because we have that methodology, it's helped us as new things pop up in the middle of the year that's unbudgeted. We have that conversation of how do we fund this. We can say, okay, well, that's going to reduce our residual risk this much. Maybe we should drop funding out of this project because it's going to help us more to do that. So it's helping us have some pretty good conversations around that. And then the last thing we did there was, I'm sure there's a few people in here familiar with NYDFS, cybersecurity regulations. That thing is entirely based on risk assessments. And so we were able to make a couple arguments around controls that we didn't have that were sufficient using FAIR. Say, hey, here's the compensating controls. This fits within our tolerances. We're good. And so it was a really good conversation to the board. And so our risk management partners, some pretty successful with that. This is a little bit more around the annual funding decisions. The risk-rated projects, this is the second bullet I'm pretty proud of. The risk-rated projects accounted for 99% of our approved portfolio. So we were able to get everything just about funneled through there. There's a little bit there around our largest project that was approved with some numbers there if you want to see it. But we're dealing with some pretty, for our size, pretty big projects. And then, you know, the biggest thing I can tell you is that we don't get pushback. So when we go to the CFO and we say, hey, here's what we want to fund, when we go to enterprise risk and our chief risk officer, they're going, okay, I get it. And that saved us so much time back and forth and trying to figure out what we want to go with. So I believe that's it. So trying to go pretty quick. I think we're saying Q&A is really great. Awesome.
Thanks, man.